Sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it. And sometimes that chance walks up to you in a small cafe and calls you Daddy. Henry was tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of working 2 jobs and raising a son alone. He walked into the cafe, just wanting a cup of coffee and 5 minutes of peace. The place smelled like cinnamon and warmth. He sat down in the corner. Then a little girl, about 7 years old, looked right at him. "Daddy," she said. Henry froze. He had never seen this child before, but when he looked up, he saw her, Claire, his ex-wife, standing behind the counter. Their eyes met. How could this be? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started like every other morning in Henry's life for the past 8 years. The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30, pulling him from a sleep that never felt deep enough. He rolled out of bed in the small apartment that always seemed too cramped, even though it was just him and his 10-year-old son, Justin. Henry had learned to move quietly in the mornings. Justin needed his sleep. School was hard enough without being exhausted. He dressed in the dark, pulling on the same work pants and company shirt he wore every day to the warehouse. In the kitchen, he made coffee in the old percolator that had belonged to his mother. While it brewed, Henry packed 2 lunches, peanut butter sandwiches, an apple each, and a small bag of pretzels. The same lunch every day, but it was filling and cheap. By 6:15 he was out the door, climbing into his old pickup truck that coughed and sputtered before the engine finally caught. The warehouse job was straightforward, loading and unloading trucks, moving pallets, organizing inventory. His back ached by midday, and his hands were rough with calluses. But it paid enough to cover most of the rent and keep food on the table. At 3 o'clock his shift ended. He'd drive home, already tired, and find Justin doing homework at the kitchen table. They'd have an hour together, precious time that Henry guarded carefully. He'd ask about school, help with math problems, listen to stories about friends and teachers. Justin was a good kid, smart and kind, and Henry's chest swelled with pride every time he looked at his son. But then, at 5 o'clock, Henry had to leave again. The evening job was cleaning offices downtown. He'd scrub toilets, empty trash cans, vacuum floors. The work was humbling, sometimes humiliating, but it paid the rest of the rent and the utilities. He'd get home around 11 at night, check on Justin sleeping peacefully, and then collapse into his own bed for 6 hours before doing it all over again. This was Henry's life. This had been his life for 8 years, ever since the divorce. He and Claire had married young, too young probably. They'd been 22, full of dreams and optimism. Claire had been beautiful, with dark hair and a laugh that made him feel like he could do anything. She'd wanted to open a cafe someday, a cozy place where people could gather and feel at home. He'd wanted to build something stable, to prove that he could make a good life, but life had other plans. Justin came into Henry's life when the boy was just 2 years old, the son from a previous relationship that had ended badly. Henry had fought for custody and won. Claire had accepted Justin, loved him even, but the responsibility of suddenly being a parent had been overwhelming for both of them. Money had been tight from the start. Henry had dropped out of school to work full-time, and Claire had done the same. The dreams they'd shared started to feel like fantasies. They'd fought about money, about time, about everything and nothing. The love that had felt invincible started to crack under the weight of reality. The divorce had been painful, but inevitable. They'd both been exhausted, worn down by the constant struggle. Claire had cried when she signed the papers. She'd left town a week later, saying she needed a fresh start. Henry had understood. He'd even been relieved in a way. The fighting would stop. He hadn't heard from her since. 8 years of silence. He'd wondered about her sometimes, late at night when sleep wouldn't come. Had she found her cafe? Was she happy? But mostly, he'd been too busy surviving to spend much time thinking about the past. Until today. Today had been different from the start. Justin was spending the night at a friend's house, a rare occurrence that Henry had finally agreed to after the boy begged. It meant Henry had the afternoon free, a gift of time he hardly knew what to do with. After his warehouse shift ended, he'd driven aimlessly for a while, not ready to go home to an empty apartment. The neighborhood he found himself in was nicer than his own. Tree-lined streets with small businesses and people walking dogs. That's when he saw the cafe. It was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, with a hand-painted sign that read, "Morning Light Café." Something about it had drawn him in, maybe the warm glow from the windows, or the way it looked exactly like the kind of place where a person could sit quietly and not be bothered. The bell above the door chimed softly when Henry pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. The interior was exactly what he'd imagined a cafe should be. Wooden tables, each one slightly different, were scattered throughout the space. Local artwork hung on the walls. In the corner, a bookshelf held a collection of well-loved paperbacks. An elderly couple sat by the window, holding hands across their table. A young mother nursed a baby, while a toddler colored quietly. A businessman typed rapidly on his laptop. Normal people living normal lives, all of them finding a moment of peace in this small space. Henry ordered a black coffee from the young woman behind the counter and found a table in the back corner, away from the other customers. The chair creaked slightly when he sat down, and he let himself relax, his shoulders dropping for the first time all day. The photograph in his wallet had been there so long he sometimes forgot about it. But sitting in this cafe, he pulled out his wallet to check his cash. That's when he saw it, the picture tucked behind his driver's license. It was from his wedding day, nearly 13 years ago. He and Claire stood together on the courthouse steps, both of them grinning. They looked impossibly young, impossibly happy, impossibly naive. Henry stared at the photo for a long moment. That version of himself felt like a stranger now. He tucked the photo away as the barista brought his coffee. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Henry allowed himself to simply sit. No work to rush to, no responsibilities pressing on him. Just this moment, this coffee, this quiet corner. He was halfway through his cup when he heard a woman's voice from the kitchen, muffled but clear enough. Something about that voice made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was familiar in a way he couldn't quite place. Henry told himself he was being ridiculous. It had been 8 years. Voices changed. Memory played tricks. He finished his coffee slowly and stood to leave. That's when he saw her, a little girl emerging from the back of the cafe. She was small, probably 7 years old, with dark hair pulled into messy braids. She wore jeans and a bright yellow shirt, and there was a handmade bracelet on her wrist. She was heading toward the counter, but then she stopped. She turned and looked directly at Henry, and in that moment, looking into those eyes, Henry felt the world tilt. Because those eyes, he knew those eyes. The little girl walked toward him with the kind of purposeful stride that only children possess. Direct, unafraid, curious. Henry stood frozen by his table, his empty coffee cup still in his hand, watching her approach. His heart had started beating faster, though he couldn't have explained why. There was just something about her face, about the way she moved, that felt achingly familiar. She stopped about 3 feet away from him, tilting her head slightly to one side. Her eyes were brown with flecks of gold, and they studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. The handmade bracelet on her wrist, blue and yellow beads strung on elastic cord, caught the afternoon light. "Daddy?" The word came out soft, questioning, as if she wasn't quite sure but hoped she was right. Henry's mouth went dry. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I think you've got the wrong person." "I'm not—" "Yes, you are." Her voice was more certain now. She took a step closer, and Henry noticed she had a small gap between her 2 front teeth. "You're my daddy." "Mama showed me pictures." The coffee cup slipped from Henry's fingers. It hit the wooden floor with a dull thud, but didn't break, just rolled under the table. He didn't bend to pick it up. He couldn't move. "Pictures? What pictures?" This child was 7 years old, maybe. He'd never seen her before in his life. He would have remembered. He would have known. "Honey, I think there's been a mistake." His voice came out rougher than he intended. "I don't have a daughter." "I have a son, but—" The girl reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were small and warm. Mama said you have kind eyes. She said you used to read stories every night and do funny voices for all the characters. She said you always made her laugh, even when she was sad. Henry's legs felt weak. He sat down hard in the chair, staring at this child who was saying impossible things. Kind eyes, stories with funny voices, making Claire laugh even when she was sad. These were things he'd done, things only Claire would know about. Private moments from a marriage that had ended 8 years ago, he had to clear his throat and try again. Who is your mama? But he already knew. Somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the confusion and shock, he already knew. The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Henry looked up to see a coffee pot lying in pieces on the floor behind the counter. And standing there, face drained of all color, hands trembling, was Claire. 8 years had changed her. Her dark hair was shorter now, cut to just below her shoulders, and there were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked older, tired, but also somehow more herself, as if she'd grown into the person she was always meant to be. She wore jeans and a simple green blouse with an apron tied around her waist. And she was staring at Henry like she was seeing a ghost, Claire. Her name came out as barely more than a whisper. She didn't move, didn't speak. The cafe had gone quiet around them, the other customers sensing the tension, conversations dying away. Even the hiss of the espresso machine seemed muted. The little girl looked between them, her small face creasing with confusion. "Mama, this is Daddy, right? This is the man from the pictures?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. She came around the counter quickly, her movements jerky and uncertain. "Lily, sweetheart, come here. Come to Mama right now." But Lily didn't move. She stayed close to Henry, her hand still resting on his. "But I was right, wasn't I? This is him?" Claire reached them and gently but firmly took her daughter's hand, pulling her away from Henry. The loss of that small, warm contact felt like something breaking. "Lily, go to the back room, now, please." "But Mama, now, Lily." Claire's voice cracked on the words. The little girl's eyes welled with tears. She looked at Henry one more time, searching his face for something, and then she turned and ran toward the back of the cafe. A door opened and closed, and she was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Henry couldn't make his mind work properly. Thoughts tumbled over each other, refusing to line up into anything that made sense. Claire, here, in this cafe, with a daughter who called him Daddy, who said Claire had shown her pictures. "Henry!" Claire's voice was shaking. "I can explain. This isn't. How old is she?" The question came out flat, emotionless. Henry was surprised at how calm he sounded when everything inside him was screaming. Claire's face crumpled. 7. She just turned 7 last month. 7 years old. Henry did the math automatically, the way he'd done countless calculations about bills and budgets and how to stretch $20 through a week. 7 years ago would be, "You were pregnant." He said it slowly, trying to make it real. "When we divorced. You were pregnant with my child. Henry, please. You were pregnant with my child, and you didn't tell me." His voice was rising now, anger starting to burn through the shock. Several customers were staring openly now, but he didn't care. "You divorced me, you left town, and you didn't tell me I had a daughter." "It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Claire?" Henry stood up so fast, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Please explain to me what it was like. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you stole 7 years of my daughter's life from me. 7 years I can never get back." Tears were streaming down Claire's face now. She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold something in. "I was scared. We were falling apart, Henry. We were barely speaking to each other without fighting. I found out I was pregnant a week after we signed the papers, and I couldn't." "You couldn't what?" "Couldn't tell me? Couldn't give me a choice?" His hands were shaking. He shoved them in his pockets to keep them still. "I had a right to know. That's my daughter. That's my child, Claire. I know." Her voice was so small. "I know, and I'm sorry. I've been sorry every single day. Sorry doesn't give me back 7 years. Henry felt something wet on his face and realized he was crying too. He wiped at his eyes roughly, angry at the tears, angry at everything. "She doesn't even know me." My own daughter walked up to me in a cafe and asked if I was her daddy, like she wasn't even sure. Do you understand what that feels like? Claire was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. I showed her pictures. I told her about you. I never wanted her to think you told her about me. The laugh that came out of Henry was bitter and sharp. You told her about the father you kept her from. How generous of you, Claire. Please. She reached out toward him, but he stepped back. Please, Henry, let me explain. Can we sit down? Can we talk about this? I don't want to sit down. But his legs felt like they might give out. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him hollow and shaky. I want to know why. I want to understand how you could do this. The pink-haired barista appeared, hesitant and worried. Claire, is everything okay? We're fine, Bridget. Claire's voice was thick with tears. Can you watch the front for a bit? We need to talk. The barista nodded and retreated, throwing concerned glances over her shoulder. Claire turned back to Henry. Please, let me close up early. Let me put Lily in the office with her tablet and then we can talk. Really talk. I'll tell you everything. I owe you that much. Henry wanted to leave. Wanted to walk out of this cafe and never come back, to pretend this had never happened. But there was a little girl in the back room, his daughter, who had looked at him with his own eyes and called him Daddy. He couldn't walk away from that, no matter how much he wanted to. Fine, the word came out harsh. We talk, but then I'm taking her with me. You don't get to keep her from me anymore. Henry, I'm her father, Claire. And one way or another, I'm going to be part of her life. Claire locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed with trembling hands. The remaining customers had already left, probably uncomfortable with the tension that had filled the cafe like smoke. Henry stood near his table, arms crossed, watching her every move. She could feel the weight of his anger, his hurt, pressing down on the space between them. She disappeared into the back room for a moment. Henry could hear her soft voice talking to Lily, though he couldn't make out the words. When she returned, her eyes were red and swollen, but she'd composed herself somewhat. She gestured to a table in the corner away from the windows. Please, sit. Henry sat, but his body remained rigid, ready to bolt or fight, he wasn't sure which. Claire sat across from him, her hands folded on the table, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Claire took a shaky breath. I found out I was pregnant 8 days after we signed the divorce papers. Henry's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He just waited. I went to the doctor because I'd been feeling sick, and I thought it was stress. The divorce had been... She paused, searching for words. It had destroyed me, Henry. We'd spent months tearing each other apart. Every conversation ended in a fight. We couldn't even look at each other without pain. That doesn't explain why you didn't tell me. His voice was cold, controlled. I know. I'm getting there. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. When the doctor told me I was pregnant, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 2 hours. I just sat there, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to call you right away. But the other part decided to run away instead. The other part was terrified. Her voice broke slightly. Henry, we were barely surviving with Justin. The money was so tight we couldn't afford to turn on the heat some months. We fought constantly about every dollar, every bill. And I thought... She stopped, swallowing hard. I thought you would think I was trying to trap you, that I'd gotten pregnant on purpose to keep you in the marriage. I would never have thought that, wouldn't you? Claire looked at him directly for the first time. Be honest, Henry. If I'd told you a week after the divorce that I was pregnant, what would your first thought have been? Henry opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He wanted to say she was wrong, that he would have trusted her, believed her, but he remembered those last months of their marriage. The accusations, the suspicions, the way they'd stopped giving each other the benefit of the doubt about anything. He couldn't honestly say what he would have thought. I would have wanted to know, he said finally. Even if I'd been angry, even if I'd had doubts, I would have wanted to know. I understand that now. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. But I was 24 years old, pregnant, alone, and terrified. I made the worst decision of my life. I left town 3 days after I found out. I moved to Riverside, about 3 hours north. I had a cousin there who let me stay with her until I could get on my feet. And you never once thought about calling me. In 7 years? The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. I thought about it every day. Claire's composure cracked again, tears spilling down her cheeks. Every single day, Henry, when I was pregnant and scared. When she was born and I held her for the first time. When she took her first steps. When she started asking about her daddy. Every milestone, every moment, I thought about you and what I'd taken from you. But you still didn't call. No, because by then, time had passed. Months turned into years, and the longer I waited, the harder it became. How do you call someone after 2 years and say, by the way, you have a daughter? After 3 years? After 5? She shook her head. I told myself I was protecting you, that you'd moved on with your life, and hearing about Lily would just cause you pain. But really, I was protecting myself. I was afraid of exactly this, of seeing the hurt in your eyes, of facing what I'd done. Henry sat back in his chair, his hands gripping the edge of the table. What made you come back? To this town, of all places. My aunt passed away 6 months ago. She owned this building, and she left it to me in her will. It was a gift shop before, but the space was perfect for what I'd always wanted. A café. Claire looked around the space with a mixture of pride and sadness. I thought about going somewhere else, but Lily was settled in Riverside. She had friends, a school she loved. Moving her somewhere completely new seemed cruel. At least here I had the building, a ready-made business opportunity, and I told myself that enough time had passed, that we probably wouldn't run into each other, a town this small. That was naive. It was cowardly, Claire corrected. I was being cowardly. I should have reached out to you as soon as I decided to move back. I should have told you about Lily then, given you time to prepare. But I kept putting it off, and then we were here, and I kept telling myself I'd do it next week, next month. And then you walked through that door today. Henry was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd said. Part of him wanted to understand, to forgive. She'd been young and scared, and he remembered how brutal those last months of their marriage had been. But another part of him, the part that had missed 7 years of his daughter's life, couldn't let go of the anger. Tell me about her, he said finally. Tell me about Lily. Claire's face softened immediately, the way any parent's face softens when talking about their child. She's smart. Too smart, Henry. She's in 2nd grade and reading at a 5th grade level. She loves to draw and paint. She gets that from me, I think. But she's also practical and good with numbers, and that's all you. What else? She's kind. Almost too kind sometimes. She brings home every stray cat in the neighborhood, every kid at school who doesn't have friends. Last month, she gave her lunch to another student who forgot theirs, and I only found out when the teacher called me. Claire smiled through her tears. She has your sense of justice, your need to make things right. And she's stubborn. Dear Lord, is she stubborn? That's from both of us. Henry felt the tiniest crack in his anger, a small space where something else could seep in. She asks about you all the time. What you're like, what you do if you'd like her drawings. I kept your picture, one from our wedding, and I showed it to her when she was old enough to understand. I told her that her daddy was a good man who worked hard and took care of people. I never wanted her to feel unwanted, but she was wanted. The words came out raw. I would have wanted her. I would have been there from the beginning if you'd given me the chance. I know that now. I think I knew it then too. I was just too scared and too proud to admit I needed you. Claire reached across the table, hesitating before placing her hand near his, not touching, but close. I can't give you back those 7 years, Henry. I can't undo what I did. But I can give you a future with her. I can step back and let you be her father, the way you should have been all along. Henry looked at her hand, so close to his. He thought about Lily in the back room, probably confused and scared by all the raised voices. He thought about Justin at his friend's house, unaware that his life was about to change dramatically. He thought about his tiny apartment, his exhausting work schedule, his complete lack of preparation for this moment. I want to meet her properly, he said. Not like before, not with all this chaos. I want to sit down with her and talk to her. I want her to know that I didn't abandon her, that I didn't know about her. Okay. Claire nodded quickly. Yes, okay. We can do that tonight. Let me talk to her first, explain things as best I can. And then we figure out what comes next. Henry pulled his hand back, still not ready to accept Claire's offered comfort. Custody arrangements, visitation, my name on her birth certificate. All of it, whatever you want. Whatever's best for Lily. Claire's voice was firm despite her tears. She's your daughter, Henry. I won't keep her from you anymore. Claire stood and smoothed down her apron, a nervous gesture Henry remembered from their marriage. Let me go talk to her. Give me a few minutes. Henry nodded, and she disappeared through the door to the back room. He could hear her soft voice again, gentle and soothing, the voice of a mother calming a frightened child. His child. The thought still felt surreal, like something from a dream he might wake up from at any moment. While he waited, Henry looked around the cafe with new eyes. This was Claire's dream finally realized. The warm lighting, the mismatched furniture, the local art on the walls. It was exactly what she'd described all those years ago when they were young and still believed in dreams. She'd built this herself while raising their daughter alone. He didn't know whether to be impressed or angry that she'd managed to create something beautiful while keeping Lily hidden from him. The door opened, and Claire emerged first, followed by Lily. The little girl's eyes were puffy from crying, and she looked uncertain, her earlier confidence completely gone. She stayed close to her mother, one small hand clutching Claire's shirt. Henry's heart clenched at the sight. This was his daughter, his flesh and blood, and she was afraid of him. Because she didn't know him, because he was a stranger. He knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less intimidating. Hi, Lily. She didn't respond, just watched him with those familiar eyes. He paused, not sure what to call himself. Your father, your dad. I'm Henry, and you're right about the pictures. Your mama did know me a long time ago. Are you mad at mama? Her voice was so small it barely carried across the room. Henry glanced up at Claire, who looked like she might start crying again. He chose his words carefully. I'm confused, sweetheart, and I'm sad, but not at you. Never at you. None of this is your fault. Mama's crying, I know. Sometimes grown-ups cry when things are complicated and hard to understand. Lily took a tentative step forward, away from Claire's protective presence. Mama said you're my daddy, my real daddy. She said she should have told you about me a long time ago, but she made a mistake. That's right. Henry's throat felt tight. And I wish I'd known about you sooner. I wish I'd been there for your birthday parties, and when you learned to read and he had to stop because his voice was breaking. I wish I'd been there for all of it. Can you be there now? The simple question asked with such innocent hope nearly undid him completely. Yes, if you want me to be, I can be there now. Lily considered this seriously, tilting her head in that way she had. Then she walked over to her coloring table in the corner and picked up a piece of paper. She brought it back to Henry, holding it out with both hands like an offering. It was a drawing, done in crayon with the enthusiastic imprecision of a 7-year-old. 3 stick figures stood in front of a house. One was labeled Mama in careful block letters. One was labeled Me with a big smile drawn on its circular face. And the third figure, slightly taller than the others, was labeled Daddy, but the face was blank, just a circle with no features. I've been drawing pictures of our family, Lily explained, but I never knew what to make your face look like. Mama's picture of you was old, and she said people change. So I always left it blank, and I was going to fill it in when I finally met you. Henry took the drawing with shaking hands. The blank-faced daddy figure seemed to stare at him accusingly, a representation of all the time he'd lost. It's beautiful, Lily. Will you come back? She asked again. So I can see your face better and draw it right? I'll come back. I promise. He looked at Claire over Lily's head. I'll come back as often as your mama will let me. Every day? Lily's face lit up with hope. Let's start with tomorrow, Claire interjected gently. Daddy has to go home tonight and you have school in the morning. But he can come back tomorrow afternoon, okay? Lily looked disappointed but nodded. Then, in a move that surprised everyone, she stepped forward and hugged Henry quickly, her small arms barely reaching around his neck. She smelled like crayons and strawberry shampoo, and the hug lasted only a second before she pulled away. Suddenly shy again, but that second changed everything. Henry left the cafe an hour later with Lily's drawing, clutched carefully in his hand, and a tentative plan to return. The next afternoon after his warehouse shift, the drive home was a blur. His mind kept replaying the evening over and over, Lily's voice saying, "Daddy," Claire's tears, the blank face in the drawing waiting to be filled in. When he got home, the apartment felt smaller and shabbier than ever. He sat at the kitchen table and stared at the drawing, trying to process everything that had happened. He had a daughter, a 7-year-old daughter who drew pictures of a family that included him, even though they'd never met. A daughter who'd hugged him and asked him to come back. The anger he'd felt at the cafe was still there, simmering beneath the surface. Claire had stolen 7 years from him, 7 years of first steps and first words, of bedtime stories and scraped knees, of all the small moments that made up a childhood. He would never get those back, no matter how many promises were made or how many afternoons he spent at the cafe. But beneath the anger was something else, a fierce, protective love that had sparked to life the moment Lily had looked at him with his own eyes. She was his daughter, his child. And whatever complicated feelings he had about Claire, whatever justified rage burned in his chest, Lily was innocent in all of this. She deserved to have a father. She deserved to have him. His phone buzzed with a text message from Justin's friend's mother, confirming that his son was settled in for the night and they'd drop him off tomorrow around noon. Henry stared at the message, another layer of complexity settling over him. Justin. He had to tell Justin. His son was about to learn he had a sister he'd never known about, that his father had a whole other child from his marriage to Claire. How did you explain something like that to a 10-year-old? Henry set the phone down and looked at the drawing again. The blank-faced daddy stared back at him, waiting to be completed, waiting to become real. Tomorrow he would go back to the cafe. Tomorrow he would start learning how to be Lily's father. Tomorrow he would begin navigating this impossible situation that had dropped into his lap like a gift and a curse all at once. But tonight he just sat at his kitchen table and let himself feel everything, the anger and the joy, the loss and the discovery, the overwhelming weight of suddenly being responsible for another child when he could barely manage to care for the one he already had. He thought about his tiny apartment with its one bedroom that he and Justin shared, the mattress on the floor because he couldn't afford a proper bed frame. He thought about his 2 jobs that left him exhausted and broke. He thought about how he was going to provide for Lily, how he was going to be present in her life when he was already stretched so thin. The practical problems loomed large and insurmountable. But when he looked at that drawing, at the careful way Lily had written "Daddy" in block letters, none of the problems seemed to matter quite as much. She wanted him in her life. That had to be enough to figure out the rest. Henry carefully placed the drawing on the refrigerator, securing it with a magnet shaped like a school bus, a remnant from Justin's kindergarten days. Then he sat back down at the table, pulled out his wallet, and looked at the old wedding photo of him and Claire, 2 kids who'd thought love was enough, who'd learned the hard way that life required more than love to survive. And now, impossibly, they were going to have to find a way to be in each other's lives again for the sake of the daughter they'd created together. He put the photo away and rested his head in his hands. Tomorrow, he'd figure it all out tomorrow. 2 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Henry visited the cafe 4 times in those first 14 days, each visit feeling slightly less awkward than the last. He'd arrive in the afternoon after his warehouse shift, still in his work clothes, and Lily would light up when she saw him. That reaction, pure, uncomplicated joy, made every difficult moment worth it. On his 3rd visit, Henry brought Justin. His son had taken the news better than Henry expected, though better was relative. Justin had been quiet for a long time after Henry explained that he had a half-sister from his marriage to Claire. Then he'd ask practical questions. Where had she been? Why didn't Dad know about her? Was she going to live with them? Henry had answered as honestly as he could, without making Claire sound like a villain. It was a delicate balance, acknowledging that mistakes had been made, without poisoning Justin against the mother of his new sister. Now, watching Justin and Lily circle each other warily in the cafe, Henry felt the weight of trying to blend two separate lives into something cohesive. Justin sat at a table near the window, pretending to be absorbed in his phone. Lily stood behind the counter with Claire, sneaking glances at her newly discovered brother. "Go talk to her," Henry encouraged quietly. Justin shrugged, the universal preteen gesture of studied indifference. "What am I supposed to say?" "I don't know, hi?" "That's weird. All of this is weird, buddy. But she's your sister. That means something." Justin made a face, but eventually stood and walked over to the counter. Henry watched as Lily's eyes grew wide as the two children stood there in uncomfortable silence. Then Lily said something Henry couldn't hear, and Justin responded, and suddenly they were talking, stilted and awkward, but talking. By the time Henry and Justin left an hour later, the two kids had exchanged phone numbers, and Lily had shown Justin her drawings. It wasn't a close sibling bond, not yet, but it was a start. The visits with Lily were the bright spots in days that were otherwise growing increasingly difficult. Henry's exhaustion was catching up to him. Working 2 jobs had always been brutal, but now he was trying to squeeze in visits to the cafe, trying to be present for both his children, trying to navigate complicated conversations with Claire about custody and the future. His boss at the warehouse had noticed. Henry had been late twice in the past week, once because Justin had missed the bus and needed a ride to school, and once because he'd stayed at the cafe longer than planned. Both times, his supervisor had given him a warning look and reminded him that reliability was important. The second job was suffering too. Henry's cleaning route took him through 6 different office buildings, and he was supposed to finish by 10:30 each night. Lately, he'd been rushing through the work, cutting corners, and still not making it home until after 11. One of the building managers had complained about the quality, and Henry's boss had pulled him aside for a conversation about maintaining standards. He couldn't afford to lose either job. But he also couldn't bring himself to reduce his time with Lily. Every moment with her felt precious, irreplaceable, a small attempt to make up for 7 years of absence. The financial pressure was mounting in other ways too. Claire had refused to discuss child support, insisting she'd managed alone for 7 years and could continue to do so. Henry had insisted right back that Lily was his responsibility now, that he needed to contribute. They'd argued about it during one visit, keeping their voices low so the children wouldn't hear. But the tension had been palpable. "I don't need your money, Henry," Claire had said. Her jaw set in that stubborn line he remembered too well. "This isn't about what you need. It's about what I need. She's my daughter, and I'm going to provide for her. You're already barely making it with Justin. I won't take food out of his mouth. That's not your decision to make." The argument had ended without resolution. Both of them frustrated and neither willing to budge. The truth was that Henry had no idea how he was going to provide for Lily when he was already drowning. His paycheck from the warehouse covered most of the rent. His paycheck from the cleaning job covered utilities, food, and Justin's basic needs, clothes, school supplies, the occasional treat. There was never anything left over. No savings, no emergency fund, no cushion for the unexpected. And now there was Lily, who deserved just as much as Justin. Birthday presents and Christmas gifts and school clothes and everything else that came with raising a child. How was he supposed to split his already insufficient income between 2 children instead of 1? One evening, after Justin had gone to bed, Henry sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills. He did the math 3 different ways, hoping one of them would somehow make the numbers work. They didn't, no matter how he arranged things, no matter what he cut or reduced. There wasn't enough money to go around. He thought about asking for a raise at the warehouse, but he'd already asked 6 months ago and been denied. He thought about finding a 3rd job, but there weren't enough hours in the day. He was already running on 5 hours of sleep. And adding more work would mean even less time with his children. which defeated the entire purpose. The only solution he could see was the small savings account he'd been building for Justin's future. It held $3,800, money he'd scraped together over the years. $10 here and $20 there, with the vague idea that someday Justin might need it for college or a car or whatever came next. Henry had been proud of that account, proud that despite everything, he'd managed to set aside something for his son's future. Now he stared at the balance on his phone and wondered if he should use some of it to help Claire with Lily's expenses. It felt like robbing one child to provide for another, but wasn't that what parents did sometimes? Make impossible choices and hope they were the right ones. He was still sitting at the table, calculator in hand, when his phone rang. It was Claire. "Henry, I'm sorry to call so late. I know you're probably exhausted. It's fine. What's wrong?" He could hear the stress in her voice. "It's the cafe." She sounded close to tears. "The espresso machine broke today. Completely died. The repair guy came out and said it's not worth fixing. I need to replace it. But a new one costs $3,000, and I don't have that kind of money. I went to the bank this afternoon to ask about a loan, and they turned me down." Henry's stomach sank. He looked at the calculator, at the bills spread across the table, at the savings account balance on his phone screen. "How bad is it?" "Bad. I can't run a cafe without an espresso machine, Henry. Half my menu depends on it. If I can't replace it soon, I'll start losing customers. And if I lose customers—" Her voice broke. "This cafe is everything. It's our income, it's our home. The apartment is upstairs. If I lose the business, Lily and I lose everything." Henry closed his eyes. He thought about Lily's face when she talked about the cafe, how proud she was that her mama owned it. He thought about how Claire had built this dream from nothing while raising their daughter alone. He thought about the fact that if Claire lost the cafe, she and Lily might have to move again, might end up who knows where, and he'd lose access to his daughter all over again. "I have some money saved," he heard himself say. "Not 3,000, but I have 3,800. It was supposed to be for Justin's future, but no." Claire's response was immediate and firm. "Absolutely not. I won't take your son's college fund, Henry. That's not why I called. I just needed to tell someone, and you're the only person who would understand what losing this place would mean for Lily. Claire, if you lose the cafe, I'll figure something out. I always do." But Henry could hear the fear in her voice, could hear that she had no idea how to figure this out. And he knew that if she lost the cafe, lost her home, it would devastate Lily. It would destabilize the fragile new relationship he was building with his daughter. "Let me think about it," he said. "Maybe there's a solution we're not seeing." After they hung up, Henry sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. The calculator sat silent on the table. The bills remained unpaid, and the impossible mathematics of his life refused to add up to anything that made sense. The paternity test results arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered in a plain manila envelope that Henry stared at for 10 minutes before opening. He already knew what it would say. He'd known from the moment he looked into Lily's eyes, but having it in writing made it real in a way nothing else had. The document was clinical, full of technical language about genetic markers and probability percentages. But the conclusion was simple. Henry was Lily's biological father with 99.9% certainty. He sat in his truck in the warehouse parking lot during his lunch break and read the words over and over. Father, daughter. The legal reality settled over him, like a weight and a gift all at once. This meant rights. This meant responsibilities. This meant his name could be added to Lily's birth certificate, that he could make decisions about her education and health care, that he was legally recognized as her parent. It also meant child support obligations, custody arrangements, and all the legal machinery that came with shared parenting. Henry called the free legal clinic his friend had recommended and scheduled an appointment for the following week. That evening, he showed Claire the results. She was in the cafe kitchen, preparing for the next day since the broken espresso machine had forced her to simplify her menu. Her hands were covered in flour, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "I knew what it would say," she said quietly, glancing at the document. But I'm glad you have it. You deserve the proof. I want my name on a birth certificate, of course. I'll get the paperwork started. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the kitchen warm and smelling of fresh bread. Finally, Henry spoke again. I talked to a lawyer. Well, a law student at the legal clinic, about custody arrangements and child support. Claire's shoulders tensed. Henry, I'm not trying to take her from you. I know she needs her mother, but I need to establish my rights legally, and I need to contribute financially. It's the right thing to do. You can barely afford. I'll figure it out. His voice was firm. She's my daughter. I'm not going to be a part-time father who shows up when it's convenient. I'm going to do this properly. Claire turned away, wiping at her eyes with her flour-covered hands, leaving white streaks on her cheeks. You're a good man, Henry. You always were. I'm sorry I didn't trust that 8 years ago. Before Henry could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Lily bounded in, backpack bouncing on her shoulders. Daddy, you're here early. The word still sent a jolt through him every time she said it. Hi, sweetheart. How was school? Good. We did science experiments with vinegar and baking soda. It was like an explosion. She demonstrated with her hands, making explosive sound effects. Henry laughed, his frustration with Claire momentarily forgotten. Sounds exciting. Did you get any homework? Just reading. But I already finished it during quiet time. She pulled out a book from her backpack. Ms. Peterson says I'm the best reader in my class. That's because you're brilliant, Claire said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. Can Daddy stay for dinner? Lily looked between them hopefully. Claire and Henry exchanged glances. They'd been avoiding that level of domestic intimacy, keeping Henry's visits to the cafe during business hours or right after closing. Dinner felt like crossing a line into something more complicated, but Lily's hopeful face was hard to resist. If your mama doesn't mind, we're just having spaghetti, Claire said quickly. Nothing fancy, but you're welcome to stay. That dinner became the first of many. Over the next 3 weeks, Henry found himself at the cafe more evenings than not. It started as staying for dinner once or twice a week, then evolved into helping Claire with closing duties while Lily did her homework. He'd take out the trash, wipe down tables, stack chairs, small tasks that made Claire's evening easier. He noticed things during those evenings. The way Claire stretched her back after being on her feet all day. How she'd sometimes stand at the window, staring out at the street with worry etched on her face. The rejection letter from the bank that he found crumpled in the trash one night. The cafe was struggling. Without the espresso machine, Claire had lost several regular customers who wanted their fancy lattes and cappuccinos. She tried to compensate by expanding her pastry offerings, but flour and sugar cost money she didn't have much of. The rent on the building was coming due, and Henry could see the stress wearing her down. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep on the cafe couch, something she did often while waiting for closing time, Henry and Claire sat at a table near the window. The streetlights cast a warm glow through the glass, and the cafe felt peaceful in a way it never did during business hours. You need to let me help, Henry said quietly. We've been through this, not with money. Well, not just with money. He leaned forward. I've been thinking, what if I moved in? To the apartment upstairs. Claire's eyes widened. Henry, hear me out. You said there's an extra room that you use for storage, right? I could take that room. Justin and I could move in. You're barely making rent on the building, and I'm barely making rent on my apartment. If we split the costs, we'd both have some breathing room. Plus, I'd be here, with Lily, every day. Isn't that what we both want? We're not together, Henry. We're not a couple. I know that. This would be purely practical. Separate rooms, separate lives. But we'd be co-parenting under the same roof. It would be better for Lily than having me visit a few times a week. And Justin, my apartment isn't in a good neighborhood. The schools here are better. It would be good for him, too. Claire was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. What about us? Living together after everything? We're adults. We can handle it. We set boundaries, clear rules. This is about the kids, not about our past. Even as he said it, Henry wasn't entirely sure he believed it. But the practical benefits were undeniable. I don't know. Think about it, Henry said. Really think about it. Not just what it means for us, but what it means for Lily. She wants me around more. I can see it in her face every time I have to leave. And Justin needs stability, a better environment. This could work, Claire. She looked at him for a long moment, and Henry could see her weighing the options, calculating the risks. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay, I'll think about it. But if we do this, we need clear rules from the start. I can't, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I can't blur the lines, Henry. I can't let myself start thinking this means something it doesn't. It means we're good parents trying to do right by our kids. That's all it needs to mean. But later that night, driving home to his shabby apartment, Henry wondered if he was being honest with himself. Being around Claire again, seeing the woman she'd become, stronger, more capable, still beautiful in a way that made his chest tight, was stirring up feelings he'd thought were long dead. He thought about how she laughed at Lily's jokes, how she'd started making coffee the way he liked it, without asking, how sometimes their hands would brush when they were cleaning up and neither of them would pull away quite as quickly as they should. Living under the same roof would be complicated, in ways he couldn't fully anticipate. But when he thought about Lily's face, about being able to say goodnight to his daughter every evening instead of a few times a week, the complications seemed manageable. Justin was sitting at the kitchen table when Henry got home, working on homework with intense concentration. Hey, buddy, it's late. You should be in bed. Couldn't sleep. Justin looked up. You were at the cafe again. Yeah, is that okay? Justin shrugged. I guess. Are we going to start living there? With Lily and Claire? Henry sat down across from his son, surprised. What makes you ask that? You're there all the time now. And you seem, I don't know, different, like you're already part of their family or something. Would that bother you? If we moved there? Justin was quiet, his pencil tapping against his notebook. I don't know, maybe, but also maybe not. Our apartment kind of sucks. And Lily's cool, I guess. For a little kid. She likes you. She told me you're the best brother ever. She did? Justin tried to hide his smile and failed. That's because I helped her with her math homework last time. Henry reached across the table and ruffled his son's hair. You're a good kid, you know that? So are we moving? Maybe. Would you be okay with it if we did? Justin considered this seriously, his face showing the same thoughtful expression Henry had seen on Lily's face when she was working through a problem. Yeah, I think I'd be okay with it, but only if we get our own room. I'm not sharing with a 7-year-old girl, Henry laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuine warmth. Deal. Our own room, just you and me. Okay then. Justin returned to his homework, the matter apparently settled in his mind. But for Henry, nothing felt settled at all. 3 days later, Henry was helping Lily with her homework at Claire's apartment above the cafe. Claire had finally agreed to let him and Justin move in, with a trial period of 3 months. They'd spent the evening discussing logistics, which room would be theirs, how they'd split the bills, what the ground rules would be. It felt surreal and practical all at once, like they were business partners negotiating a contract, rather than two people who'd once promised to love each other. Forever. Lily needed her jacket for school the next day. Something about a field trip, and Claire was in the shower. It's in my closet, she'd called out. The blue one with the hood. Can you grab it for her, Henry? Henry had nodded and headed to Claire's bedroom, Lily trailing behind him. The room was simple and tidy, with a double bed covered in a worn quilt and a dresser that had seen better days. The closet door was slightly ajar, and Henry pulled it open, scanning the rack of clothes for a blue jacket. That's when he saw the shoebox on the upper shelf, partially hidden behind a stack of sweaters. It wouldn't have caught his attention, except for one detail, his mother's handwriting on the side of the box. He recognized it immediately, that careful script she'd used for everything from grocery lists to birthday cards. His hands moved before his brain could tell them to stop. He pulled the box down, his heart suddenly pounding in his chest. Lily was saying something about the jacket being on the left side, but her voice sounded distant, muffled. The box was full of letters, dozens of them, maybe more, all in envelopes addressed to Claire, all in his mother's handwriting. Henry's hands shook as he picked up the one on top. The postmark was dated 8 years ago, shortly after the divorce. Daddy, did you find my jacket? In a minute, sweetheart. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. He shouldn't open it. He knew he shouldn't, but his fingers were already sliding the letter out of the envelope, unfolding the paper. And then he was reading his mother's words, and the world was tilting sideways. Dear Claire, I received your letter about the baby. I understand your decision to leave, though my heart breaks for my son. He would want to do right by this child. He would want to be there, to help, to be a father. But I also understand your fear. You were both so young, and the marriage had become so painful. Henry's breath caught in his throat. He kept reading, unable to stop. I want you to know that I will respect your wishes. I won't tell Henry about the pregnancy unless you give me permission. But please, Claire, reconsider. He has a right to know. This child has a right to know their father. I know my son. I know the kind of man he is. He would never turn his back on his own child. No matter how complicated the circumstances, the letter went on, offering financial help that Claire had apparently declined, expressing sadness about not being able to know her grandchild, hoping that someday things would change. It was signed with love and hope, Dorothy, Henry's mother. His mother had known. All this time she'd known. He grabbed another letter, this one dated 6 months later. Then another and another. They spanned years. His mother writing to Claire, asking about the pregnancy, about Lily after she was born, offering help, pleading gently for Claire to tell Henry the truth. Claire's responses weren't in the box, but he could infer them from his mother's words. She'd been sending updates, photos probably, keeping his mother in the loop while keeping him completely in the dark. The most recent letter was dated 5 years ago, just a few months before his mother's death. Her handwriting was shakier, the words harder to read. Claire, the cancer is back, and this time the doctors say there's nothing more they can do. I'm writing to ask you one last favor. When the time is right, and I pray it will be soon, please tell Henry about Lily. Please give my son the chance to know his daughter. I'm enclosing something for you to give him when you finally tell him the truth. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I did what I thought was right at the time, but there was nothing else in the box. No separate envelope, no additional letter. Whatever his mother had enclosed was gone. Henry heard the bathroom door open, heard Claire's footsteps in the hallway. He looked up, the letters still in his hands, and saw her face drain of all color when she realized what he'd found. Henry, my mother knew. His voice was flat, emotionless. All this time, she knew about Lily and she never told me. Henry, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you told my mother about her grandchild, but not me. That you let her die carrying this secret. That she begged you to tell me and you never did. His voice was rising now, the shock giving way to a rage so deep it felt like it might consume him. Lily started crying, frightened by the sudden tension. Claire moved quickly to comfort her, pulling her daughter close. Lily, sweetie, go to your room, please, right now. But Daddy's mad, I know. Just go to your room. Everything's going to be okay. Lily ran out, sobbing, and Henry heard her bedroom door slam. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. I was scared, Claire said, her voice breaking. I was 24 years old, pregnant and terrified. I didn't know what to do. I wrote to your mother because I needed someone to talk to, someone who knew both of us. And she told you to tell me. She told you I had a right to know. Henry was shaking now, the letters crumpling in his grip. She told you over and over for years, and you never listened. She understood why I couldn't. She understood nothing. Henry threw the letters down on the bed. She was dying, Claire. She was dying, and she spent her last months knowing she had a granddaughter she'd never meet because you couldn't pick up the phone. I know. Claire was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I hate myself for it. Your mother was kind to me. She sent me money even though I told her not to. She sent birthday cards for Lily that I had to hide, because how do you explain to a child that her grandmother is sending cards, but her father doesn't know she exists? Henry's mind was reeling. Birthday cards. His mother had sent birthday cards. Where are they? Where are the cards? I kept them. They're in Lily's room in a box. I was going to give them to her someday, when she was old enough to understand. Understand what? That her grandmother loved her, but her mother was too much of a coward to let her father know she existed. The word hung in the air between them, harsh and unforgivable. Claire flinched as if he'd struck her. You're right. I was a coward. I am a coward. I took something precious from you and from Lily and from your mother. I can't undo that, Henry. I can't give you back those years. I can't bring your mother back so she can meet her granddaughter. I live with that guilt every single day. Henry turned away from her, unable to look at her face. He thought about his mother's last months, how sad she'd been, how distant. He'd attributed it to the illness, to the pain and the medication. But now he understood. She'd been carrying this secret, this burden. She died knowing her son had a daughter he'd never met, a child she'd never hold. There was something else, he said quietly. In her last letter, she said she was enclosing something for me. Where is it? Claire's face went even paler. I don't know. I swear, Henry, when I got that final letter, there was nothing else in the envelope. I thought maybe she'd forgotten, or she'd been too sick to include it. I never found anything else from her. You're lying. I'm not. I swear on Lily's life I never found anything else. Henry wanted to believe she was lying. It would be easier if she was lying. But something in her voice, in her face, told him she was telling the truth. Which meant whatever his mother had wanted him to have was lost. Just like the 7 years he'd never get back. He walked past Claire without another word, heading for the door. Where are you going? Away from you. He couldn't be in this apartment anymore, couldn't breathe the same air as her. I need to think. Henry, please, don't leave like this. We need to talk about what happens now. What happens now? He turned back to look at her, and he saw her shrink back from whatever she saw in his face. What happens now is I go see my mother's grave and apologize for being too stupid to notice she was carrying this secret. What happens now is I try to figure out how to forgive you for taking away her chance to know her granddaughter. What happens now is I try to explain to Lily why her daddy is so angry at her mama that he can't be in the same room with her, Henry. But he was already gone. The apartment door closing behind him with a finality that echoed through the building. Henry drove to the cemetery on autopilot, barely aware of the roads passing beneath his tires. It was after 9 at night, and the gates were locked, but he parked outside and climbed the low stone wall anyway. He'd been here enough times to know the way to his mother's grave, even in the dark. The headstone was simple granite with her name, dates and a single line. Beloved mother and friend. He'd chosen those words carefully 5 years ago, never knowing how much more they should have said. Beloved grandmother, secret keeper, woman who died with her heart breaking. Henry sat down on the grass in front of the stone, not caring that the ground was damp from an earlier rain. He sat there for a long time, not speaking, not crying, just sitting with the weight of everything he'd learned. You knew, he finally said aloud to the darkness. All those years, and you knew. The cemetery was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and the rustle of wind through the trees. Henry pulled his knees up to his chest, feeling suddenly like a child again, small and lost, and looking for his mother's guidance. I don't understand, Mum. You always taught me to be honest. You always said that lies, even small ones, had a way of growing into something poisonous. But you kept this from me. You watched me struggle and grieve and miss you, and you never said a word. He thought about those last months, sitting by her hospital bed, holding her hand, while the cancer ate away at her body. She talked about regrets then, things she wished she'd done differently, places she wished she'd traveled, dreams she'd never fulfilled. But she'd never mentioned Lily, never mentioned the granddaughter who existed somewhere, unknown and unreachable. Were you protecting me? Is that what this was? Henry's voice cracked. Because if you were, it didn't work. I'm not protected. I'm angry and hurt, and I don't know what to do with all of it. A car passed on the road beyond the cemetery wall, its headlights briefly illuminating the rows of headstones before disappearing back into darkness. Henry wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Claire said you sent birthday cards. For Lily, you sent cards to a little girl you'd never meet, and you never told me she existed." He shook his head. "That must have killed you. I know how much you wanted grandchildren. I know how much you would have loved her." The wind picked up colder now, and Henry pulled his jacket tighter. He thought about the missing item his mother had mentioned in her last letter. Something she'd meant for him to have, something that might have explained everything or made it easier somehow. But it was gone, lost, just like so many other things. "I met her, Mom, your granddaughter. Her name is Lily, and she's 7 years old, and she's—" His voice broke completely now. "She's perfect. She's smart and kind, and she has your smile. I didn't see it before, but now I can't unsee it. When she laughs, it's just like you." The tears came then, hot and angry, and full of grief for everything that had been lost. His mother would never know Lily, would never read her stories or teach her to bake or pass down the small traditions that connected one generation to the next. That loss felt unbearable, piled on top of all the other losses. Henry didn't know how long he sat there. Long enough for his clothes to get soaked through from the damp grass. Long enough for the anger to burn itself out, leaving only exhaustion and a bone-deep sadness. His phone buzzed in his pocket, Claire calling for the 4th time. He'd ignored the first 3. This time he answered, "What?" "Henry, please come back. Lily won't stop crying. She thinks you left because of her, and I've tried to explain, but she won't listen. She needs to hear from you that you're not leaving her." Henry closed his eyes. Of course Lily thought it was her fault. Children always thought everything was their fault. "Put her on the phone." A moment later he heard Lily's small, tearful voice. "Daddy?" "Hi, sweetheart. Are you mad at me?" She was crying so hard she could barely speak. "No, baby, no, I'm not mad at you. I could never be mad at you. Then why did you leave? Mama said you found some letters and you got upset and you left. Was it because of me?" "No, Lily, listen to me carefully, okay? None of this is because of you. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm sad about something, but it has nothing to do with you. You're still going to be my daddy." The question broke what was left of his heart. I'm always going to be your daddy. Nothing can change that. Promise?" "I promise. Cross my heart." He used the words his mother used to say to him when he was small and needed reassurance. "Okay." Her crying had quieted to hiccups. "When are you coming back?" Henry looked at his mother's grave, at the name carved in stone. "Soon. I just need a little time to think about some things. But I'll come back soon. Tomorrow? Maybe not tomorrow, but soon." After they hung up, Henry sat for a while longer. Then he stood, brushed off his wet jeans, and placed his hand on top of his mother's headstone. "I don't forgive you yet," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can. But I understand why you did it. You loved me enough to carry that burden so I wouldn't have to. You died with that secret because you thought it was the right thing to do." He paused. "I just wish you'd trusted me enough to let me make my own choice." He climbed back over the cemetery wall and sat in his truck for a long time before starting the engine. His phone showed 7 missed calls from Claire and 3 text messages. He read them without responding. "Please talk to me. I'm so sorry. I know you need time, but please don't disappear. Lily needs you." She was right about that. Lily needed him. But that didn't mean he was ready to face Claire again, to figure out how to move forward from this. Henry drove back to his apartment, exhaustion weighing down his limbs. Justin was asleep in their shared bedroom, and Henry was grateful he didn't have to explain anything yet. He sat at the kitchen table with the letter from his lawyer, the one, outlining custody arrangements and child support calculations, and all the legal machinery of being a parent. The numbers on the page blurred together. How was he supposed to think about visitation schedules and support payments when he couldn't even process the fact that his mother had died keeping this secret? His phone rang again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Patricia Freeman. I was your mother's lawyer. I apologize for calling so late, but I received a message that you'd been asking about something your mother left for you." Henry sat up straighter. "I didn't call anyone." "Oh, well, that's odd. Someone called my office today, saying you were looking for an item your mother had left in my care." I've been going through her files and I did find something. An envelope marked, "For Henry, to be given when he meets his daughter." I wasn't sure what that meant, so I've held on to it. "But if you'd like to come by my office tomorrow, I can give it to you." Henry's heart was pounding. Yes, I'll be there." "What time?" "How about 9 o'clock? My office is downtown on 3rd Street." After she gave him the address and they hung up, Henry stared at his phone. Someone had called the lawyer asking about his mother's belongings. Claire, probably. Maybe trying to make amends, or maybe just trying to find whatever she'd lost track of years ago. It didn't matter. What mattered was that tomorrow he'd finally get whatever message his mother had left for him. Whatever she'd wanted him to know about all of this. He thought about calling Claire to tell her, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he sent a single text message. "I'll come see Lily on Saturday." "We'll talk then." Her response came immediately. "Thank you." "I'm so sorry, Henry, for everything." He didn't respond. He wasn't ready to accept her apology or to figure out what came next for them. But Lily deserved better than adults who couldn't get past their own hurt and anger. She deserved parents who could at least try to work together, even if forgiveness felt impossible. Henry set his phone aside and rested his head in his hands. Tomorrow he'd get his mother's message. Saturday, he'd see Lily and try to make her understand that none of this was her fault. And eventually, somehow, he'd have to find a way to move forward. But tonight, he just let himself feel everything, the anger and the grief and the overwhelming exhaustion of trying to hold together a life that kept fracturing in new ways. The lawyer's office was in an old building downtown, the kind with creaky wooden floors and windows that hadn't been updated in 50 years. Patricia Freeman was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She greeted Henry with a warm handshake and a sympathetic smile. "Your mother was a wonderful woman. I was honored to handle her affairs." She gestured to a chair across from her desk. "Please sit." Henry sat, his hands gripping his knees. He hadn't slept well, his mind racing with possibilities about what the envelope might contain. An explanation? An apology? Some piece of wisdom that would make sense of everything? Patricia pulled a manila envelope from her desk drawer. It was sealed, slightly yellowed with age, and Henry's name was written across the front in his mother's careful handwriting. Below his name, in parentheses, "to be given when he meets his daughter." "She left this with me about 6 months before she passed," Patricia explained. "She said that if a young woman named Claire ever contacted me about a child, I was to give this to you. But she also said that if years passed and Claire never came forward, I should give it to you anyway, on the 10th anniversary of her death. She wanted you to have it eventually, one way or another." Henry took the envelope with trembling hands. It was thick, containing more than just a letter. "Would you like some privacy?" Patricia asked gently. "Yes, thank you." She left the office, closing the door quietly behind her. Henry sat alone in the old wooden chair, holding the last words his mother would ever give him. For a moment, he couldn't bring himself to open it. Once he read whatever was inside, that would be it, the final communication, the last connection. But he'd come this far. He couldn't turn back now. He carefully opened the envelope and pulled out the contents. There was a letter folded around something else, a small book with a worn leather cover. Henry set the book aside and unfolded the letter. His mother's handwriting filled 3 pages, front and back. "My dearest Henry, if you're reading this, it means you finally met your daughter. I cannot tell you how much it breaks my heart that I won't be there to see that moment, to watch you become the father I know you'll be to her. I'm writing this letter because I need you to understand why I kept Claire's secret, why I carried this burden for as long as I did. You're angry right now, I know you are. You have every right to be. But please, read this with an open heart and try to understand. When Claire first wrote to me about the pregnancy, I was torn. Every instinct I had as your mother told me to tell you immediately. You deserved to know. But Claire was desperate, terrified, and broken. She begged me not to tell you. She said the divorce had destroyed both of you, and she couldn't bear to trap you with another obligation, Another weight on your already heavy shoulders. I saw the state you were in after the divorce. Henry, you were barely functioning. You were working yourself to death trying to provide for Justin, trying to prove you were a good father, even though your marriage had failed. You looked at me with such hollow eyes, and I worried that one more burden might break you completely. So I made a choice. I chose to honor Claire's wishes and keep the secret, but I stayed in contact with her. I sent money when she needed it, even though she usually refused. I sent birthday cards to your daughter, my granddaughter, with the hope that someday she'd know how much I loved her. Was it the right choice? I honestly don't know. I've questioned it every day since. But I made it out of love. Love for you, love for Claire, and love for a little girl I would never meet. Here's what I need you to understand. Claire didn't keep this secret because she's cruel or vindictive. She kept it because she was young and scared and convinced she was protecting you. Just like I kept it because I thought I was protecting you. We both made mistakes, Henry, but we made them out of love. I'm enclosing something that I hope will help you see Claire differently. It's her journal from the year after the divorce. She sent it to me when she was at her lowest point, desperate for someone to understand what she was going through. She asked me to burn it, but I couldn't. I kept it because I thought that someday, if you ever learn the truth, you might need to see inside her heart during that terrible time. Read it, Henry, not to excuse what she did, but to understand it. And then, I hope, you can find it in your heart to forgive her. Not for her sake, but for your daughter's sake. Children need parents who can work together, who can move past old hurts for the sake of new love. I love you, my son. I'm so proud of the man you've become, the father you are. And I absolutely know, that you'll be an amazing father to your daughter too. Don't let anger rob you of that joy. Don't let the past steal your future. Be happy. Forgive when you can. Love your children with everything you have. And know that I'm watching over all of you, proud and grateful that my family is finally complete, even if I can't be there to see it. All my love, forever and always, Mom. Henry's vision blurred with tears. He set the letter down and picked up the small leather journal. The cover was worn smooth, the pages slightly yellowed. He opened it to the first entry, dated a week after the divorce was finalized. Claire's handwriting was shaky, emotional. The words sometimes smeared, as if tears had fallen on the page while she wrote, "I'm pregnant. I found out today, and I've been sitting in my car for hours, trying to figure out what to do. I can't tell Henry, I can't. We've hurt each other so much already. If I tell him now, he'll think I'm trying to trap him, trying to force him back into a marriage that was killing both of us. And even if he doesn't think that, what then? We go back to fighting about money and struggling to survive. We bring another child into a home where the parents can barely stand to look at each other. I love him. God help me, I still love him. But love isn't enough. It wasn't enough to keep us together, and it won't be enough to make this work. So I'm leaving. I'm taking this secret with me, and I'm going to build a life somewhere else. Maybe someday I'll find the courage to tell him, but not now. Not when we're both so broken. Henry sat in the lawyer's office for over an hour, reading through Claire's journal. The entries spanned the pregnancy and the first year of Lily's life, raw, honest accounts of fear and loneliness and desperate love. 3 months pregnant now. I'm showing enough that I had to tell my cousin. She was kind about it, but I can see the judgment in her eyes. Another single mother with no plan and no money. I'm working at a diner, saving every penny I can. Henry's mother sent me money again. I sent it back, but she sent it again with a note saying it wasn't charity. It was for her granddaughter. How could I refuse that? Lily was born today. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect in every way. I held her and cried for an hour because she has Henry's eyes. How am I supposed to look at those eyes every day and not think about what I've done? But I also looked at her and knew, absolutely knew, that I made the right choice. She deserves better than parents who fight constantly. She deserves peace. Lily said mama today. First word. I called Henry's mother to tell her, and we both cried on the phone. She asked again if she could tell Henry. I said no. I know I'm being selfish. I know I'm hurting people, but I'm also terrified. What if he hates me? What if he tries to take her away? I can't lose her. She's everything. It's been 2 years since I left. Henry's mother sends photos. Henry with Justin, both of them smiling. He looks tired but happy. I tell myself he's better off without the burden of another child. I tell myself I did the right thing. But late at night, when Lily asks about her daddy, I'm not so sure anymore. The entries went on, documenting the small triumphs and constant struggles of single parenthood. Claire's fear gradually shifting to guilt, her certainty crumbling into doubt. And through it all, the constant refrain. She loved him, she was sorry, she didn't know how to fix what she'd broken. Henry closed the journal and sat back in the chair. His anger hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more complex, a mixture of grief and understanding, frustration and empathy. Claire had been wrong to keep the secret. His mother had been wrong to help her keep it, but they'd both been trying, in their flawed and human ways, to protect the people they loved. He thought about what his mother had written. Don't let anger rob you of that joy. Don't let the past steal your future. Patricia knocked softly on the door. Are you all right? I don't know, Henry said honestly, but I think I will be. He drove straight to the cafe. It was mid-morning on a weekday, and the place was busy with the breakfast crowd. Claire was behind the counter, looking exhausted. She saw him come in and froze, uncertainty written across her face. Henry walked up to the counter. We need to talk. When can you take a break? Bridget can cover for me. She untied her apron with shaking hands. Come upstairs. In the apartment, they sat at the small kitchen table. Henry set the journal between them. My mother left this for me. Your journal from when you were pregnant and after Lily was born. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. I thought I'd lost that. I asked your mother to destroy it. She didn't. She kept it because she thought someday I'd need to understand what you went through. Henry, I'm so sorry. Let me finish. His voice was quiet but firm. I've spent the last 3 days being angry. At you, at my mother, at everything. And I'm still angry. I don't know if that anger will ever completely go away. You took 7 years from me, Claire. 7 years with my daughter. Nothing can give me that back. Claire was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. But I also understand now that you weren't trying to hurt me. You were scared and young and making impossible choices. Just like my mother was trying to protect me in her own way. You both made mistakes, huge mistakes, but you made them out of love. I did love you, Claire whispered. I still do, in a way. Not the same way as before, but I know. Henry reached across the table and took her hand. The first time he'd voluntarily touched her since finding the letters. I read every entry. I saw how hard it was, how much you struggled, how many times you almost called me but didn't because you were afraid. I was so afraid. I know. But Claire, we can't keep living in fear. We can't keep letting the past control everything. We have a daughter who needs us, both of us, to figure this out. What are you saying? Henry took a deep breath. I'm saying I'm still moving in, not because I've forgiven everything, but because Lily needs stability. She needs both her parents in the same place working together, and maybe if we can do that, we can find a way to move forward. You're willing to try after everything? For Lily? Yes, she didn't ask for any of this. She deserves parents who can put aside their hurt for her sake. He paused. My mother's last words to me were about forgiveness, about not letting anger steal my future. I'm going to try to honor that. Claire squeezed his hand, unable to speak through her tears. But I need you to promise me something, Henry continued. No more secrets, no more hiding things because you think you're protecting me. If we're going to do this, really do this, we have to be honest with each other. About everything. I promise. No more secrets. They sat there for a long moment, hands clasped across the table, beginning the hard work of building something new from the ruins of what they'd lost. 6 months had passed since Henry and Justin moved into the apartment above the cafe. The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been growing pains, adjustments, moments when the old wounds threatened to reopen. But slowly, carefully, they'd built something that worked. The cafe was thriving now. Henry had taken on more responsibilities, handling the heavy work and helping with evening shifts, while Claire managed the business side and the morning rush. With his income contributing to household expenses, Claire had been able to replace the espresso machine and even expand the menu. The cafe had become exactly what she'd always dreamed, a neighborhood gathering place where people felt at home. Henry had quit his cleaning job. Between his warehouse salary and what the cafe brought in, they had enough to live on. More than enough, actually. For the first time in years, Henry wasn't exhausted all the time. He had energy to play with his children, to help with homework, to simply be present. Justin and Lily had become inseparable. The initial wariness had transformed into genuine sibling affection. Henry often found them curled up together on the couch, Lily reading aloud, while Justin pretended not to be interested, but never moved away. Justin helped Lily with her math homework, and she taught him to draw. They bickered like all siblings did, but underneath the bickering was a solid foundation of love. Tonight, the cafe was hosting a community art show, local artists displaying their work, including several of Lily's drawings. The space was packed with neighbors and regulars, and the atmosphere was warm and celebratory. Henry stood near the back, watching Lily show off her artwork to anyone who would listen. She'd submitted 5 drawings for the show, but the one that caught everyone's attention was titled My Family. It was more sophisticated than her earlier attempts. She'd been taking art classes, but the subject was the same. 4 figures standing together in front of the cafe, Mama, Daddy, Justin, and herself. This time, Daddy's face was fully realized, complete with the smile lines around his eyes and the small scar on his chin from a long-ago accident. Claire appeared beside him, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She offered him one without speaking, and they stood together watching their daughter. "She's amazing," Claire said softly. "She gets it from you. The artistic talent. She gets the stubbornness from both of us." Henry laughed, the sound genuine and easy. 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined standing here like this. Comfortable, almost peaceful. The anger hadn't disappeared completely, but it had faded to something manageable, something he could live with. "I got an email from the school today," Claire said. "They want Lily to skip a grade. They think she's ready for 3rd grade work. What do you think?" "I think we should talk to her about it. See what she wants." She glanced at him. "We should decide together. That word had taken on new meaning over the past 6 months. They made decisions together, raised their children together, ran the cafe together. They weren't a couple. They'd both been clear about that boundary, but they were partners in every way that mattered. Justin appeared, slightly out of breath. "Dad, Lily wants you to come see something." Henry followed his son through the crowd to where Lily stood beside her drawings. She grabbed his hand the moment she saw him. "Look, Daddy." She pointed to a small red dot sticker on the corner of My Family. "Someone bought it. A real person wants to hang my drawing in their house." "That's incredible, sweetheart." Henry knelt down to her level. "I'm so proud of you. Are you sad that someone else gets to have it?" "Not even a little bit. Because I get to have the real thing. I get to have you." Lily threw her arms around his neck, and Henry held her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Over her shoulder, he could see Justin talking animatedly with Claire, both of them laughing at something. He could see the cafe filled with people, warm and alive, and exactly what they'd all needed. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder he'd set months ago. It was the anniversary of his mother's death. He'd visited her grave that morning, bringing flowers and telling her about Lily, about how well things were going. He'd told her he understood now, that he forgave her, that he was trying to forgive Claire too, one day at a time. "I miss her," he'd said to the headstone. "I wish he could see this. See how happy Lily is, how well we're all doing. But I think she'd be proud of us for figuring it out." Now, standing in the crowded cafe with Lily in his arms and his family around him, Henry felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, striving hope of someone trying to survive, but the quiet, steady hope of someone who'd found their place in the world. Claire caught his eye across the room and smiled. It was a complicated smile, tinged with sadness for what they'd lost, but also bright with gratitude for what they'd found. They would never be what they once were. Too much had happened, too much had changed. But they'd built something better, something stronger and more honest and more real. The evening wound down gradually. Neighbors drifted home, artists packed up their unsold pieces, and Bridget started cleaning up. Henry found himself on the cafe's small balcony, the one that overlooked the quiet street. Claire joined him, 2 fresh cups of coffee in her hands, a mirror of earlier. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened?" she asked. "If I'd told you from the beginning? Sometimes, but I try not to. We can't change the past. No, we can't." She was quiet for a moment. "But we can be grateful for the present." For this, Henry agreed. Below them, the street was peaceful. Inside, their children were getting ready for bed, bickering good-naturedly about whose turn it was to use the bathroom first. Behind them, the café sat quiet and ready for tomorrow's breakfast rush. And around them, the night settled in soft and comfortable, like coming home after a long journey. Henry thought about that first afternoon, walking into an unknown café just looking for a moment of peace. He thought about Lily's voice saying, "Daddy?" and how that one word had changed everything. Sometimes life gave you a second chance when you least expected it. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, you found your way home, not to the place you'd been before, but to somewhere better, somewhere built on truth and forgiveness, and the kind of love that grew stronger for having been tested. Henry looked at Claire, then back at the lights of the café and smiled. This was enough. This was more than enough. This was everything.